Hey guys, thanks for clicking on this video. I am back from break, and today we're going to discuss what I think are the top 5 plot lines in the Wheel of Time series. Obviously, with a series of this girth, there are way too many plot lines, many of them very brilliant, for there to be any sort of consensus on this topic, so I'm sure that my picks will be at least a little bit controversial. But, to be clear, I am not reading these plots based on any sort of concrete criteria or anything like that. Rather, I'm just picking out my favorites, so there's no need to get totally up in arms about anything. So anyways, kick back, relax, and then rage into your keyboard about how awful my choices are. Please, I really do enjoy the raging into the keyboard. I would very much appreciate it if you did that. Okay, without further ado, let's get into it. Number 5. The Defense of the Two Rivers. Kicking off the list at number 5 is a choice that I'm sure will be faced with almost universal disagreement, but for me, it's one of the most exciting and heartfelt plots in the books. I am, of course, talking about the battle for the Two Rivers, the defense of Emond's Field, whatever you may want to call it. The battle for Emond's Field, you say? Preposterous! Neither Matt nor Rand are in it, and it starts off so slow, not to mention how much Philae is featured through the whole ordeal. What the fuck? Yes, I acquiesce. This plotline is not without its faults, but for every valley it has, there is also an astounding peak. And, speaking of peaks, this was definitely the peak of Perrin's arc. As a reminder, for those of you who might not recall, the plotline opens up with Rand pretending to be pissed at Perrin and Camelin and sending him away to deal with attacks on the Two Rivers orchestrated by Padan Fain. He's joined by Loial, Philae, Gaul, Bane, Chiad, and when he arrives, the situation is distressing, to say the least. The Cautons and the Lewins are being held by the White Cloaks, who have been instituting their own delicious flavor of fascist rule. Various farms and homesteads have fallen to Trolloc raids and White Cloak burnings, and, to cap it all off, there is absolutely no unity amongst Two River folks, or even just Emond's Field folk. Plus, there's no wolves around, and Perrin's family is dead. And what the fuck is going on with this Lord Luck guy? Anyways, it doesn't take long for Perrin to clean the place up, and watching him do it is honestly just so fulfilling to me. This is where Perrin really ascends from a simple blacksmith in over his head into a true leader and a worthy companion and sidekick to the dragon, even if he refuses to admit it up until the very end. How does he get all this done? Well, just by doing what he thinks is the right thing. He warns the villagers about the Trollocs. He tells them how unsafe it is. He reminds them that the people of the Two Rivers are strong and independent. They never had to count on anyone else before for anything. If there's a job that needs doing, they can do it, whether farming and smithing or rescuing their friends and homes. Just by going house to house on his way to rescue the Cautons and Lewins, with Tam and the gang, he ends up rounding up a hefty posse and uniting all of Emond's Field in a solid defense against Trollocs and White Cloaks alike. Without going into too much detail, he then rescues his friends from the White Cloaks, leads several successful raids on the Trollocs, and eventually tells the White Cloaks to fuck right off. And that Lord Luck guy, too. Tells him to fuck right off as well. Hunting wolves. What the fuck was he thinking? Why is this plot so great, though? Well, it has a little bit of everything. There's plenty of action, character development, catharsis, and even romance. Enough men and Trollocs die to turn fields red with blood. Perrin grows from a boy to a man to a lord, stumbling all the way. And who didn't get a positively giddy grin when Child Bornhold has an absolute shit conniption over not getting his way with the Two Rivers folk? And even though Philae generally sucks as a character, watching her develop with Perrin, get married to him, and then return to him in his greatest moment of need was, although a little bit corny, truly special. For all those reasons and more, I had to find a place for this in the top 5. I mean, this is an amazing plotline. Plus, Perrin has a tough time when it comes to plotlines. He's really not a bad character, but most of what RJ gives him is pretty shit, so I had to squeeze him in here somewhere just to let the people know that Perrin is not to be overlooked. Okay, on to number 4. The Rescue of Maureen. Major spoilers, if you haven't gotten very far in the series yet, this is a big time book 5 through 13 spoiler. Okay, with that out of the way, let's begin. Maureen was trapped in the realm of the Aelfin and the Eelfin, and it was up to Matt, Tom, and Noel to break her out. Said like that, it really doesn't sound that remarkable, does it? There are no giant battles. Not all that much is at stake. And with Tarmon Gai'don around the corner, you have to wonder if we even have time for this shit at this point in the books. But Even still, this story arc is one of the best Wheel of Time has to offer, and that is so for 3 reasons. Reason 1 is, of course, Matcham Calvin. Everyone's probably wondering about now, how stiff can my Matt boner get? And the answer to that question would be surprising, because it cannot be answered by science, which lacks the proper tools for actually measuring such stiffness. But I digress. After all, this storyline isn't even peak Matt. Peak Matt occurs when the plot itself is in a lull, when the crew is searching for the Bowl of Winds or cavorting with a traveling circus is where you really find peak Matt. This plotline merely features media Matt, a trifling matter. Well, I mean, when troubling matters such as plot and character development get too much in the way for Matt to properly shine, you get media Matt. Even still, he is the feature protagonist of this arc, and as the far and away best character in the series, that very much works in this arc's favor. The second reason is how personal and emotional the stakes are in this story. All too often in Wheel of Time, the protagonists have no choice but to act. If they don't, either they will die, or the world will end, or someone they love will die. There's no choice. Rand doesn't take up the mantle of the dragon because he wanted to. He did it because if he didn't, literally everyone, including himself, would die. Elaine, Egwene, and Ny'naeve didn't hunt the Black Ajah because it was the right thing to do. They did it because if they didn't, the world would end. And because they wanted to prove that they could, stubborn as they are. But in this story, it's different. There was no world-ending reason to save Moraine. Had Moraine not been saved, things would not have worked out all that differently. It's actually a lot like Perrin's fight for the Two Rivers, except we actually care about Moraine as readers as opposed to 99% of the Two Rivers. That's off topic though. Anyways, it's because Matt's decision to go with Tom to save Moraine was so completely voluntary and unnecessary that it takes on such weight. Because Matt didn't even really like Moraine. In fact, he openly disliked and distrusted her. Sure, he had a begrudging respect for her, and he admits many times that he's grateful to her for taking him out of Emond's Field, but no ordinary person would take on a journey of almost certain death to try and save someone for whom they only kind of respected. No fucking chance. Someone who would do that is a hero, which makes it all the more complicated because as we all know, Matcham Calvin is no bloody hero. And that's not even counting Tom and Noel. In Tom, we see an old man who once reviled Aes Sedai because of what they did to his nephew, and then he falls in love with one anyways. The same man who recently saw his last lover killed, and the one before that leave him. There isn't much time left for Tom. He's old. He's no Aes Sedai. In fact, he's no Ta'veren, or Hero of the Horn either. He's just a fucking ordinary man, taking on godlike creatures for the chance of 10 years of happiness before he croaks. How could you not admire his audacity, his fearlessness, and the raw emotion tied to that decision? And then, of course, there's Noel, aka Jane Farstrider, aka the mythical man who traveled all the world, aka badass motherfucker. He doesn't even know Moraine. Shit! He's only known Matt and company for 4 months. Even so, he partakes in the adventure, and when push comes to shove, he lives his life on the line for his friends that he had only begun to know. Something we never see from any other character. I mean, sure, other people lay their lives on the line to save their best friends that they've been making relationships with for fucking years, but someone that they just met 4 months ago who aren't really their best friends? That shit doesn't happen. And then, with that, the real adventure begins. They arrive at the Tower of Genji, trace the seal to get in, and set off in their conquest to get the better of those bloody snakes and foxes. Which brings us to reason number 3, the mystery of it all. This story occurs in Book 13, and by this point, we, as readers, are pretty damn familiar with Randland and all of its peculiarities, its politics, the settings, the antagonists, protagonists, the cultures, and so on. What makes this story so great, then, is that it takes place outside of Randland, with an antagonist that isn't the forces of the shadow or humans who like to make slaves. Instead, we see 3 relatively ordinary men without any magic to their name face off against relatively godlike, yet rather indifferent creatures who only seem to interact with men for the purpose of tormenting them. Half of these creatures possess some form of omniscience because they can answer any 3 wishes, and the other half have some kind of omnipotence because they can grant any 3 wishes and create things. I don't even know how to say it. They're basically Shenron, okay? And then the world they live in doesn't even seem to follow our rules. Basically, this whole setting, all the antagonists, everything about it is totally anomalous to the Wheel of Time story. It's almost like a sidetrack, and even still, it does a great job of fleshing out the situation and creating tension and character building moments. In short, this plot is an anomaly. It's filled with mystery. It's outside the scope of the main story. It's filled with emotional tension. And of course, it stars our favorite wool-headed troublemaker, Matt. Goddammit, on to number 3. The capture of the Stone of Tyr. This is probably another controversial pick, especially for a top 3 selection, but I had to work it in here because I think it does a lot of things right that, because of the plot, how the plot progresses, RJ wasn't able to effectively recapture afterwards. As we all know, this story takes place in the 3rd book, The Dragon Reborn, which, as far as I'm concerned, is just about the last we see of the innocent Two Rivers youth that we have begun to know thus far. Maybe that's some weird kind of nostalgia talking, but for me, this plotline feels very impactful because of how it, in a sense, metaphorically kills off the innocence of our heroes. Sure, the moment they left Emond's Field, chased by Phage and Drakkar, they were changed forever, but in my opinion, it's at this point, when they take the stone, that shit gets real. It's at this point that the fun adventure really ends, and the all-out war begins. For Elaine and Ny'naeve, this is the first time that they've really had to face the consequences of their role in Rand's fight with the Shadows. It's the first time they've been sealed off from the One Power, and then they're kidnapped, beaten, and held in a dank cell awaiting God only knows what kind of fate was cooked up for them on top of it. In short, it's the first time they've really had to face the Shadow, and I think that experience really shows them that they're in this for real. Obviously, Egwene got an early helping of this experience during the Great Hunt when she became a dog for the Seanchan, but in a sense, that was different since that was a human enemy. Their actions and motivations, while equally as disgusting as the Shadows, were at least human. But where she was treated so horribly, I have to say that Egwene's innocence was definitely lost in Book 2. For Matt, it's the first time he's had to face real danger and seize the moment while being actively conscious of it. The key word here, of course, being actively conscious of it. In the first couple books, he definitely did some heroic things, but he was definitely not all there for them. For Rand, this was his true coming to terms with being the dragon. Up until this, he really could have just been a strong male channeler. He went to Tyr because he knew the prophecy and wanted to test whether or not he really was the dragon. Even though he fought Ishamael twice before this, he was still on the Ny'naeve side. He thought he killed the Shadow the first time, and I'm pretty sure he thought he killed Ba'alzamon the second time. And as far as Perrin goes, I'm going to be honest and say that I really actually don't remember how he managed to even get to the stone or what he did there, but I'll assume that he was definitely there for the fight during the battle for the stone when the Shadow invaded. So I would say that had something of an impact on him, but really his real transformation took place when he fought for the Two Rivers in the next book. Anyways, that's a little bit off topic. So, going into this fight for the stone, our heroes are, by and large, still pretty youthful and relatively innocent and inexperienced by Wheel of Time standards. None of them have any sort of mastery over their various, powers and abilities, and it's safe to say that their lives are definitely at risk, and they have no idea what the fuck they're actually doing. It's this innocence and inexperience that, in my opinion, makes the ensuing conflict so captivating. The women are all locked in a cell, and Matt has to risk his hide to get them out, while also not having all the memories and abilities of legendary commanders past. Rand scales the stone barehanded because he can't really use the power that well, like the ale. Maureen vaporizes Balal, and Rand has an excellent scene chasing Ishamael through Telar and Rioed while Ishamael is fucking crying like a baby, and I swear, I will never forget the moment when Rand shows Barrelane why they can't be together, and then he goes outside, sees the carnage, and rallies the fighters, shouting, "The stone still stands!" And then, of course, there's another moment pivotal to Rand's development here when he tries to breathe life into the little girl who the Trollocs slaughtered. Which, of course, also reminds me of that amazing moment when Rand strikes all the Shadow's forces at once with lightning, and the sagely Moraine is left fucking stupefied, wondering if what she just saw is even possible with the power. And, on top of all of that, this is our first introduction to the mystical Black-Veiled Ale, the savage warriors that drop Trollocs like flies. I mean, woo! Just thinking about those scenes brings some chills down my spine. Anyways, to sum up, this is a top 3 choice because it's a pivotal point of development for the majority of the main cast. There are some crazy badass scenes from Rand, Moraine, and Mat, and 2 Forsaken died, making it of some pretty significant plot consequence, and it was, in a sense, the conclusion of innocence and adventure that had marked the first 3 books, and the beginning of the total war that spans the next 11. Now, number 2. The Retrieval of the Horn. Yes, the capture of the stone was excellent, because in a way it was the climax of the youthful adventure part of Wheel of Time and the beginning of the all-out war against the Shadow. Rand died in those halls, and the dragon was reborn. But that doesn't mean that that's the best Wheel of Time has to offer, either post-Calendar or even pre-Calendar. Far from it. In fact, I almost left this choice as number 1, but in the end I just couldn't make such a ludicrous decision. I am, of course, talking about the Retrieval of the Horn of Valir. When this book was written, I am honestly of a mind to believe that RJ had a far shorter series in mind, maybe 4 or 5 books. Why? Because of how much importance was attached to the horn early on, when in reality its effects are honestly relatively insignificant when dealing with Forsaken level channelers. Thus, I think that this book was supposed to be something of a mini-climax for the series, a midway high, if you will. Hence, it is utterly unsurprising how fucking thrilling and well done it is. First you have the villains, the vile Seanchan, worse than the Shadow. At least when the Shadow makes you a slave, you can still retain some degree of freedom. With the Seanchan, you are literally a dog on a leash. And I still shudder thinking back to how fucked up Egwene's situation was, especially at the point when she was beginning to turn and adjust to her new life and start to actually enjoy it. It's honestly fucking frightening. It's like a horror movie. Then, of course, you have Rand and Mat's journey to the Horn, riding out with the Shienar and Loyal, traveling the ways, meeting Selene, and all in all, they're beginning to grasp the gravity of their situation. And who could forget the forces of the Shadow? Ba'alzamon, Liandrin, and even poor Ingtar. Ingtar and his noble sacrifice. If I was to give a brief explanation of why this story is here, though, it would be this. The Great Hunt is the eye of the world, but better. Why? Well, first off, we'll start with the similarities. They're both epic adventures where characters must travel far and wide to capture the MacGuffin. Secondly, our heroes are still young and ignorant of the world around them. Third, the scope of the Shadow and Randland as a whole is still relatively unknown. Thus, they are both traditional epic adventures, but the differences are where the magic really happens. The Great Hunt is paced far quicker than the Eye of the World, where I vividly remember seemingly endless chapters of a deranged Mat and Rand in one town and then another performing as gleemen for a place to sleep. Seriously, that was endless, and not even a good time because that was before Mat really became Mat. Secondly, a new enemy entered the mist. A second enemy always adds a level of intrigue and mystery that can't be achieved by a single enemy as generic as one labeled the Shadow. I mean, the Seanchan are much more complex. Thirdly, the finale was longer, better described, more complex, and more satisfying. In Eye of the World, our heroes got tossed around, the Green Man died, and then Rand channeled and won somehow. It's honestly very vague. Plus, he won by pushing a Shamael into a fire. Really makes little sense. But here, we see Egwene's tense escape, Rand's duel with Turak, the lurking presence of Padan Fame, Ingtar's ultimate sacrifice and redemption, the blowing of the horn, the arrival of Arthur Hawkwing, and of course, Rand's duel in the sky against the Shadow as incarnated by Ba'alzamon. Basically, the climax of this story was fucking perfect. There was human fighting, there was magic fighting, there was tension and uncertainty, and there was a huge payoff in the blowing of the horn and the arrival of Arthur Hawkwing. Best of all, this was done before our heroes were established as the premier players in the universe. Truly, it was a masterful conclusion. Now, before I get into number 1, I want to share with you all my honorable mentions. Making this list, as I said earlier, was really tough, and cutting these guys out was a serious challenge to me. But alas, 5 is 5, and these 7 just couldn't fit. They are as follows in no particular order. 1. Journey through the Red Waste and the capture of Carheen. 2. Retrieval of the Bowl of Winds. 3. Capture of Tar Valon from Elaida. 4. Rand Redemption Arc. 5. Cleansing of Sidene. 6. Journey to the Eye of the World. 7. Rand's kidnapping and Dumai's Wells. And 8. The attack of the Seanchan on Tar Valon. Okay, on to number 1. I'm sure you all knew what this was before the video even started, but fuck it. Number 1 is Tarmon Gai'don, and I don't think this is a surprise for anyone. After all, climaxes are almost always the best part. Some of you might want me to give a deep explanation of why I thought this was better than the rest, but I don't know if that's even necessary. Instead, I'll just share my favorite parts. First, Zen Rand fucking with Egwene was priceless. It was high time she got knocked off her high horse, and I'm talking about when he met her at Tar Valon and when he met her on the field. Second, Moiraine's arrival was about as cathartic as any reunion could be. Third, Demandred was easily a top 3 villain, and him not being further explored is a serious fault of Wheel of Time in my opinion. He was the only one with a good plan. He pretended to be Rand the Dragon in Shara, which is about as big as the rest of the kingdoms combined. Truthfully, he almost could have won the war by himself. Fourth, the successive duels against Demandred were fucking amazing. Even if I have no idea what the sword forms look like, I could only imagine, and they were orgasmic. Fifth, the large-scale battles were brilliantly done, especially when the realization was made that Magedion and Grandel were being as spider-like as one could really be. And I could go on. Egwene's duel with Taim, Aludra's cannons, Oliver and the Horn, Perrin vs. Slayer, Mat's command, Lansbrazen's attacks in Tarwin's Gap, etc., etc., etc. But seriously, guys, you know why this is here, so I won't go any further with it. Just know that this is one of the best endings I've ever seen to a series, and the only reason why George R.R. Martin hasn't released his is because he knows that he can't touch this. Mike fucking dropped. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. Be sure to tune in every week for discussion videos on various fantasy series. Next week, I'll probably be doing one about The Witcher, even though my last one got no videos. But honestly, that's still up in the air. Anyways, guys, stay tuned. Thanks for checking this out. Be sure to like and subscribe. Leave a comment down below. Peace out.